My name is Lena. The receptionist said the first available appointment is in 5 months. Is it possible to get an earlier slot? Dr. West looked at me calmly and indifferently and said, "Unfortunately, I'm not in charge of the schedule. You'll need to coordinate with the receptionists." Then, without pausing, she continued talking to her colleague and walked toward the counter. A few minutes passed. I was no longer there. Suddenly, Dr. West froze. She stopped dead in her tracks, completely still. Her colleague turned around in surprise and asked, "Doctor, is something wrong?" Dr. West didn't answer. She stood there frozen for a few seconds. Without saying a word, she walked quickly back toward the entrance. She went outside, looked around the parking lot, searching left and right. I wasn't there. Dr. West came back inside and went straight to the reception desk. In a firm voice, she asked, "That girl who was here a few minutes ago, did she fill out any forms? Do you have any information on her?" One of the receptionists replied, "No, doctor, she just asked about appointments. We didn't register anything." Dr. West paused for a moment. Then she said, "Check the list of people who registered for the seminar 2 days ago. See if there's an email under the name Lena." Half an hour later, one of the receptionists rushed into Eleanor's office and said, "Doctor, we found it. There's an email registered under lena.art@gmail.com. Eleanor didn't say anything for a moment. She just pressed her hand against the desk, her face turning serious. Then she said in a calm but firm voice, "Send a message to that email. Tell them the clinic reached out. If she calls, get her phone number and address, and book her an appointment for tomorrow." The receptionist nodded and left. 2 hours later, one of the receptionists came back into the room and said, "Doctor, that girl called. We got her address and scheduled her for tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eleanor just gave a small nod, saying nothing. From that moment on, Dr. Eleanor West had no other patients that day. Her mind was completely occupied with one thing, something she couldn't shake. Every few minutes, she kept glancing at the address saved on her computer screen. Near sunset, she finally couldn't resist anymore. She left the clinic without telling anyone and got in her car. When she reached the street, she parked across from the house, turned off the engine, and just stared at it. She sat there motionless for a few minutes, not moving, just looking at the house. Then she quietly opened the car door and got out. She walked toward the front door with slow, heavy steps. She stood there for a few seconds, like she was fighting with herself one last time. Then she raised her hand and rang the doorbell. The door opened. I was standing there. The moment I saw her, my body froze. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. She just stood there, staring at my face. The silence felt heavy. Finally, she spoke in a hoarse voice. "I just have one question for you." But she didn't finish. Suddenly, her eyes moved past me and looked at something behind my shoulder. Her eyes widened. I quickly turned around. My dad was standing in the hallway. He was about to leave the house, but he had stopped completely. All the color had drained from his face. His bag slipped out of his hand and fell to the floor. 3 people. 3 different looks. 3 different silences. She and my dad were staring at each other like time had stopped between them. I was standing in the middle, confused and lost, just watching them. My heart was pounding. In a louder voice, I said, "Can someone please explain what the hell is going on? How do you two know each other?" Neither of them answered. She was still staring at my dad, and he couldn't take his eyes off her either. Suddenly, my dad turned pale. He put his hand on the wall to steady himself and said in a weak, strained voice, "Lena, go inside." I looked at him, worried, but my feet wouldn't move. I turned back to her, still waiting for an answer. She didn't even glance at my dad. She looked straight at me and asked in a calm but clear voice, "Was your mother's name Leah?" I froze. It felt like I'd been struck by lightning. There was absolute silence for a few seconds. Then I finally whispered, my voice barely coming out, How do you know my mother?" My dad's voice came again, this time sharper and filled with fear and anger. "Lena, I said go inside." This time, it wasn't a request, it was an order. I reluctantly walked inside, my head full of questions. My dad waited until I was completely out of sight, then closed the door behind me. Now it was just the two of them standing face to face in the sunset. My dad took a few steps toward her. He looked tired and broken. In a low, pleading voice, he said, "Eleanor, please. I haven't told Lena anything all these years. Nothing. I didn't want your past to affect my daughter's life. Please, don't come into her life like this." She stood completely still. Her face was like stone. No emotion showed on it. She just stayed silent. After she left, I quickly opened the door and ran outside. "Dad, wait!" He was about to get in his car when he stopped. I reached him, my voice full of desperation. "What happened? Who was that woman? Why did she come here? What did she say to you?" He looked at me for a few seconds. He looked exhausted and troubled. Then he said quietly, "I'm not feeling well right now, Lena. I'll explain it to you later. I promise." He got in the car and drove away. I stood in the middle of the yard, watching his car disappear down the street. When I came back inside the house, the silence felt heavier than usual. It was like even the walls were waiting to see what I was going to do. For a few minutes, I didn't move. I just stared at a spot on the wall, trying to process everything that had happened in the last few hours. Then suddenly I stood up. I grabbed my laptop and opened it. First, I searched for Eleanor West. A lot of photos and articles about her seminars and books came up. The pages were filled with interviews, but there was almost no information about her personal life. Even her Instagram and Facebook seemed to exist only for work. My hands were slightly shaking. I searched my mom's name and added Eleanor West next to it. I kept searching until I finally found an old UCLA student album from 1994. A group photo. I was scrolling through it without really paying attention when my fingers suddenly stopped on the trackpad. I froze. My mom was in the picture, wearing the same smile I'd seen in photos around the house my whole life. Standing right next to her was the woman who had shown up at our door just a few hours earlier. My breath caught in my throat. My hand instinctively went to my mouth. My eyes kept moving back and forth between the two faces. My heart was pounding. I leaned in and zoomed in on the photo, like I needed to make sure I wasn't imagining things. Underneath, written in simple old handwriting, it said, "Leah and Eleanor Brooks." I stayed completely still for a few seconds. It felt like time had stopped. Then, in a shaky, disbelieving whisper, I said, "Aunt?" A tear slipped down my cheek before I could stop it. It was past 9 at night. The sound of a key turning in the front door broke the silence. I quickly stood up from the couch. My heart was racing. The door opened. My dad walked in, looking exhausted. When he saw me standing there staring at him like that, he paused for a moment. I didn't waste any time. My voice wasn't calm anymore. "Who's Eleanor?"